Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday. Today is Monday, November 9th. Welcome to a brand new week as we march through the month of November together. I do hope you all had a nice weekend, and thank you for joining us for worship yesterday. What a great day it was for our Mission Celebration Sunday. My dear thanks to Cynthia Weems, my good friend, who preached just a wonderful sermon for us on how to live out our faith in community and make a difference in the world. And wasn't it great to see so many faces of our missions partners, the kinds of agencies that you support when you step into the story with your generosity? And it was great to see just so many of them doing such great work in the community and in the world. It was just a wonderful day yesterday. And of course, the other big thing that is in the forefront of our minds here on November 9th is that we are on the other side of the general election last Tuesday. I don't know about you, but it was a wild week last week for me. As I said in my comments yesterday at the start of worship, I found my thoughts racing and my emotions running high in the wake of the election, and I suspect that was the case for many of you. And then, of course, on Saturday, we received the news of the apparent winner, now President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And so what I wanted to do today is just reflect on that with you. What is it from a faith perspective that we can say in relation to this election and any other election, frankly? Regardless of who would have won this last election, how do we think about these things from the perspective of the Christian faith? One of the first things I want to say is to remind us of something that I've said a few times over these last several weeks, and especially last week in my midweek message. It is to remember the role and the limits of our elected leaders, which is to never ascribe to them, to never grant them the power to provide for us the kind of ultimate comfort and ultimate security that only God can provide. I think oftentimes when we feel like our candidate won or our political party won, that we feel like everything's going to be okay. And certainly there are dramatic shifts that happen when big elections like these happen. But we have to remember that we cannot expect our earthly kingdoms to provide for us the kind of ultimate comfort and provision and security and peace that only God provides. And that's another way of saying that our primary allegiance, our primary obedience is never to any one government, never to any one leader or any one political party. Our primary allegiance as the church is to God, is to Jesus Christ. I thought about that a lot earlier this year. You know, we've been walking through the Bible together, and one of the long stretches we went through was the stories of the kings. I remember back in the spring, we read about Saul and David and Solomon and all of the kings that led the Israelites for centuries. And one of the interesting things that I discovered, that I shared with you, is that the moment the first king arrived on the scene is the very same moment that the very first prophet arrived on the scene. When King Saul entered the picture, so did the prophet Samuel. And in fact, every king after Saul had a counterpart in a prophet that was there to speak to them words of challenge and words of comfort from God. It's a way of reminding us that earthly leaders are never the full embodiment of God for us. They are imperfect. Even the ones we might call good kings in the Bible all had their flaws, and each and every one of them needed to have a prophetic counterpart, the actual messenger of God, to keep them and the people in line. We should never conflate the two. As people of faith, we should never expect of our kings, our queens, our leaders, our royalty, to provide for us the kind of divine presence in our midst that only God's presence can give to us. And I think that's really important for us to remember. Let's keep in perspective what our earthly leaders can do and should do and what they can't do and what we can't expect them to do. And let's remember that our primary allegiance is to God. When I found out that Vice President, now President-elect Joe Biden, was announced to be the winner on Saturday, I immediately thought of a memory that I had from now 13 years ago, of a time that I met Joe Biden. Back in 2007, I had freshly arrived in Iowa to begin my season of ministry there in a town called Cherokee, Iowa. And I happened to arrive right in the middle of presidential campaign season. From the summer of 2007 all the way through the fall, there were presidential candidates crisscrossing Iowa and coming through our little town of 4,500 people almost every week. Like almost every week, right there on Main Street, there would be another candidate coming by. And so one of the really weird privileges of living in Iowa at the time was that we had the chance to be up close and personal and see very, very closely these people who were running to be president. I remember seeing Barack Obama. Barack Obama arrived, and he showed up just a block from my house. I mean, the girls and I, Grace and Maddie and I, just took a walk just down the street to the local community center, which was right next to us, and there we listened to Barack Obama, then Senator Obama, address us. And I didn't fully know at the time that what I was standing in was the presence of the person who would be our next president. So we also got lots of national media sort of convening on our town. I've got this picture still of Grace and Maddie with CNN political correspondent John King. And of course, some of you probably watched him all through the week last week. And there it was, 2007, in the Copper Cup in Cherokee, Iowa on Main Street. And I happened to be there getting a cup of coffee myself. And I said, hey, I kind of interrupted him. I said, would you mind taking a picture with my two girls? He was very kind. He said, well, I'm in the middle of writing something. I'm up against a deadline, but yeah, I'd love to take a picture. And the girls to this day don't remember that moment because they were so young, but it was kind of neat to see them. And then on December 19th, 2007, I decided I wanted to hear more about Joe Biden. He was appearing in Sioux City, which was about an hour away, and so I took that hour-long drive to go see him at an evening event in a town hall meeting. It was a sort of a packed house, and he spoke for, I think, 45 minutes. And I wanted to talk to him a little bit afterwards, just to pick his brain about things and listen to him. And I will never forget, I will really never forget, that I was at the end of the long line of people who wanted to talk to him, and everyone else had gone home. I was the last person in line, but Joe waited to talk to each and every one of us. And so if you can imagine, it was in this big room, it was just Joe, a couple of his handlers, and me. That's all that was left in that room. But he waited to talk to me, and he talked to me for about 5 minutes about what his faith meant to him. And I was really touched that he would wait to talk to me. Of course, his handlers were shooing him toward the exits, and the car was already running. But he wanted to talk to me about what his faith meant to him, and I thought it was just a wonderful thing. Those days seem like a long time ago. I've lost both that leather jacket that I was wearing as well as a lot of my hair back then, but I carry with me still the memories of meeting now the person who's going to be our next president. You know, again, regardless of who would have won this election, I think that our responsibility is the same, which is to pray for our leaders. In fact, I would invite you right now, as an act of prayer, to think about what your prayer is right now for Joe Biden, for Kamala Harris, for our elected leaders, for a peaceful transition of power, what your prayers are for Donald Trump and the current administration, what your prayer is for our local elected leaders and for the current state of our country today. What are your prayers right now? What words or phrases capture your prayer? And I invite you to just type it right now in the chat section as an act of prayer together. One of the things that we learned before we left the Old Testament back in August is what the Lord requires of us. I don't know if you remember back in August, we read the text from Micah 6:8. O mortal, what does the Lord require of you? And so as I'm praying for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, for all of our elected leaders, whether they be local community leaders here in Tampa and Hillsborough County, or any of our leaders on a national level, I'm going to pray Micah 6:8, because the very same thing that the Lord requires of each of us is the very same thing that the Lord requires of our elected leaders. Vice President-elect or President-elect Biden, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, what does the Lord require of them? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly before God. And I'll be offering that three-part prayer for them, just as I pray that for myself, just as I pray that for all of you. And what do those three things mean, particularly in the world of politics? Number one, justice. What does it mean to do justice? Oftentimes when we think of the word justice, we ascribe to it some notion of punishment or vigilante justice, kind of retributive justice. Or sometimes when we think of the word justice nowadays, we sort of overlay it with a kind of social political label. When you hear the word social justice, oftentimes people will ascribe that to being just a progressive idea or a liberal idea, the whole social justice warrior piece. Either one of those, vigilante justice or social justice, are just a partial understanding of what true, complete biblical justice means. I think it is so important to fully understand what the Bible, what the Old Testament understands by justice. I think it is the second most important word to understand in the Old Testament, second only to the word covenant. Justice in Hebrew is the word mishpat, which simply means a full restoration of relationships. That fully restoring one's relationship to God, fully restoring relationships between people, and fully restoring our relationships with all of creation. That's what justice means. Sometimes it does mean punishment, but oftentimes it means restoration, it means reconciliation, it means forgiveness, it means care, it means protection. Justice is directly related to the word shalom. And shalom means a full restoration of the created order back to the way God intended it. In other words, to do the work of justice means to provide a way for people to be in full relationship, to be in equal relationship, to be in healthy relationship with other people. And I think that can be applied in so many ways to so many of the political hot button issues that we have today. Certainly the work of justice involves dismantling racism in every form, whether it be in the human heart or whether it be in the systems in our world. Because it means allowing full participation, equal access by people, regardless of who they are, into the full commonwealth of God's goodness for us, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, their ability, regardless of whatever their past is or who they are. To do justice means to open the table wide for all people to fully be in restoration with each other, in relationship with each other. And it also means fully restoring our relationship with the environment, with the planet. I mean, that's a theme all throughout the Old Testament. That's why the phrase environmental justice is so consistent with the Bible's view of shalom. It means fully restoring our relationship with our planet. And so my prayer for our elected leaders is that they would do the work of justice, to fully open our relationships with each other, to promote equality and restoration for all people. But it's interesting that even though Micah begins with the word justice, he doesn't end with the word justice. he then moves to the idea of loving kindness, of being kind, of simply being good. That's the Hebrew word for chesed. The Hebrew word is chesed, which is very simply translated as kindness or mercy or goodness or just being a decent human being. That really is a base level expectation for us, isn't it, nowadays? But when you're talking about politics, when you're talking about our elected leaders, especially when you're talking about Washington, sad to say, we have to remind our elected leaders to just be kind. But more than that, we have to remind ourselves to be kind in the way we talk to each other, in the way we act toward one another, particularly people with whom we disagree, in the way we engage other people in social media, in the way we tweet, in the way we post on Facebook, the way we comment on other people's posts, to simply be kind. I remember the words of my friend Gary Mason, who helped bring an end to the struggles in Northern Ireland. He said, even though there was an end to violence with the gun, we continued to commit violence with the tongue. And I just pray for kindness in our elected leaders. And I know that when I say something like that, immediately people, unfortunately, nowadays will say, oh, Magrey is attacking Donald Trump. He's talking about the way Trump talks and the way he tweets. And unfortunate, it really is unfortunate that when I say something as basic as just be kind to one another, it is unfortunate that immediately what jumps to people's minds is that I'm ascribing that responsibility solely to Donald Trump. You know what? There will be a time when Donald Trump is no longer our president. It's January 20th, right? And if the election had gone the other way, it'd be 4 years from now. But regardless, there would be a time when Donald Trump will no longer be our president. And so there would be a time when that mirror of the expectation of kindness would no longer get to be shined only on him, shown only on him. It would have to be shown on us. And so we might as well begin that now. It is too simple to just externalize the responsibility of kindness onto one person, let alone Donald Trump. We have to expect that of ourselves. And we now have to pray for that for our elected leaders. I'll be praying that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and all of our elected leaders demonstrate kindness and love and compassion and generosity and mercy, as well as work for justice. But now the final thing. Walk humbly. Walk humbly before God. My prayer is that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, all of our elected leaders, and ourselves will keep proper perspective on who we are, will embrace our limitations, will recognize that we are utterly interdependent on each other and on God. That none of us have all the power, none of us have cornered the market on all truth, none of us get to use our perspective as hammers to pound other people with. We are not all that. That we all need to walk with humility, first of all before God, and then humility with each other. We have to expect of ourselves and of our elected leaders the permission to say, I made a mistake. We have to allow ourselves and our elected leaders the permission to say, I'm sorry. We have to expect of ourselves and expect of our elected leaders to say, you know what? I have made mistakes. I will make mistakes. I am imperfect. Please forgive me. And we have to be able to forgive each other. And we have to be able to say, I need you. You need me. We need each other. And that's really at the heart of what humility is. And I'll be praying that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris demonstrate that kind of humility in a way that we won't punish them for it, in a way that we might expect the same of ourselves. So that's what I'll be praying for them, for you, for me. I will say that last Saturday when I was watching Joe Biden's speech, there was a particular moment that really caught my attention and I found to be very meaningful. And I know it was the case for so many of you in my interactions with you on Facebook. It was the moment that Joe Biden began to quote the words of a hymn that were deeply meaningful for him and for his family, a hymn that is well known to so many of us in the Christian faith. And as he was reciting the words to this hymn, many of you told me that you all started singing along, and I have to admit I was too, because it is that precious of a hymn and so meaningful for so many of us. So I thought that I would close our time together with the sharing of this hymn. And if you know the words, feel free to jump along and sing along. And let's claim it as a prayer of promise and conviction that God will indeed give us the kind of comfort and security that only God can provide. And let's offer it up as a prayer for ourselves, for our elected leaders, for our world, and for our country. And he will lift you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And let all God's people say, or type, Amen. It's been good to be with you. I hope that you'll join us this Sunday for worship, 9:30 and 11 o'clock. I can't wait to preach for you this text from 2 Corinthians. I've never preached this particular text before or shared this incredible story from Paul's ministry about generosity and the impact that we can have when we step into the story of God's generous love. So join us for worship this Sunday. I'm excited about that. And of course, join us every morning here on Facebook at 9 o'clock and on the Portico page from Monday through Thursday at 12:15. It's been good to be with you. Let us be in prayer for each other, for our country, for the world, and let us remember that we are loved. Have a blessed week.